CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Pay for our gas in Russian rubles or we'll turn off the taps tomorrow. President Putin's warning to Europe.
The United States says it'll release 1 million barrels of oil a day from its strategic reserve to bring down soaring prices.
Fresh efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from the port city of Mariupol as Russia's bombardment of Ukraine continues.
And Western intelligence claims Russia's president is being misled by his generals, too fearful to tell him how badly the Ukraine war is going.
Russia will cut off gas supplies to Europe if countries refuse to pay in rubles, Vladimir Putin has warned.
The Russian leader has signed a decree saying foreign buyers must pay in the local currency from the 1st of April or their contracts will be halted. The German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, said Russia had agreed that Germany could continue to pay for its gas in euros or dollars. Well, our correspondent Stuart Smith is in Moscow, and a reminder that Russia's new media law limits what correspondents in the country are able to report. Stuart, good to see you. Russia seems to have changed its mind on the gas bill. I'm not sure if we're through to Moscow. Stuart Smith, I'm not sure if you're able to hear us. I think we may return to Moscow later in the programme. And in the meantime, we will continue with the rest of today's news.
US President Joe Biden is set to announce another big release of oil from America's emergency reserves, 1 million barrels a day for the next 6 months. Oil prices had already fallen ahead of the decision, which was revealed in a White House statement a short time ago. The war in Ukraine has rocked global energy markets over concerns that supplies could be cut. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Tony Waterman, who is in Texas. Tony, we have the White House statement. We're going to be hearing from Joe Biden shortly. What will he say?
Well, the president, when he takes the podium about 90 minutes from now, is going to very much come out saying that he is on the side of the American consumer. As you say, he's going to order the immediate release of 1 million barrels of oil every single day for the next 6 months. This is the largest drawdown from the emergency reserves here in the United States ever in all of history. And it's really meant to tame these soaring gas prices, which hit a record high after the Biden administration banned the import of Russian energy earlier this month. Those prices have come off just a little bit, but they're still sitting at $4.22 a gallon, which I know is still cheaper than what a lot of Europeans are paying right now. But that is a shockingly high price for Americans who were paying about 80% less just a year ago at the pump. And when you take these high prices coupled with the overall inflation, which is sitting at a 40-year high here in America, this has really taken a toll on President Biden's approval ratings as we head into a midterm election. He also knows that he needs the buy-in from the American public if he is going to be able to maintain this raft of sanctions against Russia. Americans use about 21 million barrels of oil a day. Nearly half of that goes towards gasoline. So this 1 million barrel a day infusion isn't going to drastically change things, but it could start easing the pain that a lot of people are feeling at the pump.
So accessing reserves is one thing, but America is a massive oil producer. So why aren't they doing more drilling to bring down these prices?
This is a major bone of contention between the Biden administration and the oil and gas industry. The president says that the industry right now is sitting on more than 12 million acres of non-producing federal land and also 9,000 already approved drilling permits, some of them sitting idle for years now. And in fact, when he makes his announcement later today, he's going to be calling on Congress to penalize these companies that are not drilling. The oil and gas gas industry, when you speak to them, they say, listen, we're up against a lot of challenges like every other industry right now. We're having supply chain issues. Some of them are having difficulty sourcing the fracking sand that's used for the drilling process. Some of them also facing massive labor shortages. But the biggest challenge they are facing right now is coming from shareholders who are pressuring them for high dividend payouts. The Dallas Fed put out a survey just last week, and 59% of respondents said that they weren't drilling right now because of pressure from their shareholders. So this is going to be an issue that's going to have to be addressed. Also, you have some mixed messaging coming from the White House. He's also going to be calling today, the president, for Congress to pass his plan to speed up the transition to green energy. And that includes a transition away from combustion engines and over to electric vehicles. So some mixed messaging for the oil industry. They're saying, listen, why are we going to invest all of these hundreds of millions of dollars to produce more oil, perhaps in the short term, when we know that the long-term plan is to phase it out completely?
Tony, thanks very much. Tony Waterman there in Texas.
Well, let's try and return to Moscow now, because Russia will cut off gas supplies to Europe if countries refuse to pay in rubles. Vladimir Putin has warned. The Russian leader has signed a decree saying foreign buyers must pay in the local currency from tomorrow or their contracts will be halted. Germany's chancellor said Russia had agreed that Germany could continue to pay for its gas in euros or dollars. Let's return to our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. Stuart, Russia seems to have changed its mind on the gas bill. What more can you tell us?
Yes, from the statements by the Russian President Vladimir Putin today, it was quite a stark warning that he will indeed demand payment in rubles, and indeed this will be implemented very quickly from Friday. But having said that, when you look at the detail of what was signed by the president, there seem to be a number of caveats that could make this easy for these foreign buyers of gas to pay. For a start, it only affects buyers who are receiving gas through a pipeline. So that immediately excludes countries like the US, UK, South Korea and Japan, who import their Russian gas via ships through liquid natural gas. So it's only the European countries, and it's only the European countries who have been declared so-called unfriendly countries. But there's more than just that, because it seems the way this is going to work that the buyers will be forced to open two Russian bank accounts. They'll pay their euros or their dollars into one Russian account, and then the Gazprom bank in Russia will be the one that converts those foreign currencies into Russian rubles. Then Gazprom bank will pay the oil exporter. And so, in effect, these foreign buyers are still being able to pay in dollars and euros as they have done, as is stated in their long-term contracts. But the Russian president can claim that he's forcing foreign buyers to pay in rubles. And so a face-saving measure really for both sides here.
And the ruble has recovered. Is this linked? What's behind that?
It is linked, yeah. It's one of a few factors that are bumping and strengthening that ruble against the US dollar, now to levels seen before the so-called special military operation began. It's managed to climb all the way back up. And one of them is indeed this, the fact that payments will be forced into rubles, even if it's not the companies themselves that are paying in rubles. But on top of that, there are also numerous measures taken by the central bank restricting the ability of foreign exchange to leave the country, and also forcing foreign exchange to be turned straight into rubles. For example, any company that receives payment in euros or dollars must convert 80% of that into rubles straight away to stay on the right side of the law. And so these measures creating a stronger ruble, but economists say, don't be fooled. This is still a very unique economic situation. This is unlike anything Russia's seen in the last 30 years. And so although it appears the ruble is strengthening, the Russian economy is by nowhere near how it was before the operation began.
Stuart, thanks for that. Stuart Smith, our correspondent in Moscow. Well, the world's largest oil cartel, OPEC, and its allies will stick with existing policy despite pressure to increase its output.
Oil prices have soared to record levels, making our fuel cost more. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports from OPEC headquarters in Vienna.
As expected, OPEC Plus is not changing course. Ministers of the largest oil-producing bloc met for just 12 minutes, agreeing to limit production increases for May to 432,000 barrels per day. Much too little, according to the US and for many consumers at the pump. So far, OPEC's moderate oil policy has seen fuel prices rise and helped to fuel rising inflation amid a boycott of Russian oil companies. But oil demand has fallen in the last few days, partly due to COVID lockdowns in China. Washington's plans to compensate for the current energy crisis with its own oil reserves could end OPEC's current supremacy, at least for a certain period of time. But that's a situation that's unlikely to last. Russia plays too important a role in the global oil market. For now, the two largest producers within the OPEC Plus cartel, Russia and Saudi Arabia, have been able to ensure high margins. And a break between the OPEC countries and Russia seems unlikely. In times of war, the cartel has always stuck together, even during conflicts within the group. Johannes Fleischberger, CGTN, Vienna.
Well, the anticipated release of US petroleum reserves has brought on another fluctuation in oil prices. They're down by more than $5 in response to the news. Brent futures for May fell $5.47 to $108 a barrel. That follows, of course, a huge increase in the price of oil. Brent crude hit $139 a barrel earlier this month after Russia invaded Ukraine and, of course, the West imposed economic sanctions on Moscow. Well, Spencer Walsh is Vice President for Oil Markets at S&P Global and joins us now. Welcome to the programme. Thanks very much for your company. What is the significance of this US announcement on the release of the strategic oil reserve? Is it any more than tokenism?
Hi, good to speak to you. Yes, I think it is. I believe it's the largest release ever from US stocks, 180 million barrels. So it is a significant amount of oil. And it's going to be gradually released 1 million barrels per day over the next 6 months. That's about 1% of the world's demand for oil. We think that the supply shortage from Russia could be 3 or 4 million barrels per day. So it certainly helps, but it will not fix the problem.
Do you think we're going to see wider coordination between the United States and its allies when it comes to this kind of release and this kind of management of oil supplies?
I think it's unlikely. I think the US is in a fairly unique situation that they have a very large amount of oil in storage, whereas most of the other countries, like European countries, they have a much lower amount, and they probably want to hold on to that for an emergency situation, whereas the United States historically has a very large inventory from when they were a much larger importer of oil, whereas now they're a much bigger producer of oil, and so they have no real need to keep as much emergency supply in storage as they do.
I do want to ask you about the significance of the timing of all this, because OPEC has this meeting today, and of course it's the same day that President Biden plans to make his move. We're going to hear about that in the next couple of minutes. Is this a snub to OPEC? How do you read it?
I definitely think it's not a snub to OPEC. It's about different countries doing what they can, what they feel is appropriate. The whole world is suffering from the high prices of oil and gas. It's a particularly sensitive political topic in the US, and hence they are releasing the strategic reserves. OPEC is a different matter. They are continuing with what has been a policy now for almost a year to gradually increase supply, and effectively they are bringing oil back to the market that was taken from the market when COVID hit us 2 years ago.
Well, OPEC had their meeting earlier, of course, and they decided to stick to their production plan despite these high oil prices. What should we make of that?
I think, as your report said, very predictable. There would have been very short odds on them making that decision. As you reported, the meeting took 12 minutes. So it's a very sensitive politics within OPEC Plus, which includes Russia and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States, and Saudi Arabia and Russia. They effectively want to keep, in communication and maintain a good relationship with both parties. So they've continued what they've been doing for the last 9 months, which is every month increasing production by 400,000 barrels per day. a very steady ramp up, and that's what they are trying to do. Therefore, effectively, they are keeping on board with Russia because they're keeping the alliance with Russia going, and also offering a little bit to the United States and the rest of the world because they can say, yes, we are trying to gradually increase our production.
Spencer Welch at S&P Global, thank you very much for coming on the programme.
My pleasure.
So how is this announcement from the United States playing out at home? Let's take you now to Wall Street and join our correspondent John Terrett. John, what's the president's thinking on this release of the Strategic Oil Reserve?
Well, you know, Robin and Jamie, it is all being done with one eye on the midterm elections, which are coming up in November. Very, very crucial elections, which the Democrats need to do well in. And the threat against them by the Republicans is at this moment very, very strong. And the point is that when you are the President of the United States, you get blamed for whatever happens in your country after the first 100 days in office. So after that, whatever it is, you're the one in charge, you're the one the people look to, and the people right now are presently blaming Joe Biden for inflation, which is at a 40-year high, including, of course, and being driven by the increasing price of crude oil. So what he's doing, and my understanding, Tony Waterman said this, and I think she's absolutely right, other journalists in America are not sure, but I think we're spot on here, he's going to release 1 million barrels of oil a day over the next 6 months, bringing the total to 180 million barrels. And the idea is to try and put pressure on the oil price and just ease it a little bit. Now, Biden's already released stuff from the strategic reserves, which are held all over the country. He has let 80 million barrels go so far. He did that in November, and I think also last month as well. And, of course, it comes after he has appealed to the oil majors to try to do more to bring the price down. He's appealed to the Saudis. That didn't seem to work. He's appealed to OPEC. That didn't seem to work. There was even talk that he might sue OPEC at one stage, which I think certainly would not work. And OPEC, as you've been reporting, is now planning to, I think they're going to increase their production by a tiny bit. I mean, really not enough to make any difference. So the price at the pump in America is astronomical by American standards. For a gallon of oil, or a gallon of gas, as it's known here, petrol, in New York we're paying $4.32, in New Jersey $4.19, and California way over $6 a gallon at the moment, according to the motoring organization, the AAA. And I think the reason that they're not releasing any more than 180 million barrels over 6 months is that they're hoping that domestic production, which, as we've already heard, is still pretty lively. They're hoping that the domestic producers will make up for the difference and be able to replenish the reserves within the course of the next 6 months to a year. But we do have oil down by $4 now, 3%, to stand at $103 a barrel of oil. But remember, folks, it was only $70 a barrel just last January, a couple of months ago.
Oh, I'm not sure if we still have John Terrett with us. John, I wanted to ask you about how the markets are reacting to Putin's threats to cut off the gas in Europe.
Well, I think I can only speak from Wall Street's perspective, and I think that our Moscow correspondent explained it very, very well. I think here on Wall Street, it is a sense that this is really a lot of talk, that there is a sleight of hand going on here, which President Putin is doing as if he were a magician, because as we heard from our Moscow correspondent, most companies, most countries are still going to be able to pay for their gas natural gas in euro dollars. It's Gazprom that's going to do the conversion. So it's a sort of face-saving exercise all round. It allows President Putin to say, well, look, you know, we're making them pay in rubles, and the ruble, as you heard earlier, has bounced from its...
We've lost our connection to John Terrett there in Wall Street.
Well, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in India as the Kremlin tries to gain the country's support. He's calling on India to ignore Western economic sanctions and buy Russian gas and oil. Lavrov's trip coincides with a visit by his British counterpart, Liz Truss, who's hoping to garner India's support for Ukraine. India has so far refused to condemn Russia's invasion. CGTN's correspondent Ravinder Bauer reports now from Delhi.
Hectic time in India as far as foreign affairs are concerned. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss's visit coincides with the visit of her Russian counterpart, who is here on a 2-day visit. The British Foreign Minister's trip is a part of a wider diplomatic push on the conflict in Ukraine. Truss is expected to underline the importance of democracies working together to deter aggressors, as well as a closer UK-India relationship to boost security and jobs. She's expected to call for more cooperation in cybersecurity and defense. She's also likely to announce a new India-UK program to protect online infrastructure. Sources in India say that Britain will be carrying out joint exercises to practice fighting off cybercrime and ransomware attacks. Bilateral relations, however, in recent days have been strained over the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Britain and India are currently in talks over a free trade deal, and that is surely to come up when the two diplomats meet. Truss's agenda will mostly revolve around defense-related trade, including security, technology, and boosting defense ties with India. India's foreign ministry has said that maritime cooperation in the Indo-Pacific will also be discussed. So a number of issues are on the table, and soon we will find out what discussions went on between the two nations.
Ravinder Barwa reporting. Well, the visits to Delhi by the British and Russian foreign ministers could prove to be the tipping point for India's role in the conflict in Ukraine. While India seeks to maintain its position of non-alignment, it's coming under pressure from major global powers who argue its position is becoming unsustainable as the war goes on. Let's talk now to Hapiman Jacob, who's Professor of Foreign Policy at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thanks for joining us on the programme. So what we're seeing is effectively both the UK and Russia wooing India. Does it have to choose a side, and who would it go for?
Well, I think a lot more people are actually wooing India at this point of time, not just the United Kingdom and Russia. We also have the Deputy National Security Advisor of the United States in town. So I think there are a lot of strategically important visits that are taking place in Delhi. Delhi at this point of time is perched as a swing state in many ways, at least in normative terms, if not in material terms. New Delhi has nothing to contribute really to the war in Ukraine, the Russian war in Ukraine. It is really has taken a position that it is neutral as far as this is concerned. And I think this is quite expected of a country that is located in the region and faces a great deal of strategic vulnerability from China, from Pakistan, from Afghanistan. So while it sees itself as part of the political West, democracy and freedom of speech and all of those values, India identifies itself with the West. But I think there are realities of geography that are imposed on a country like India. That's why probably it is taking a stance that is quite neutral and not something that is liked very much by the Western world. And I must also add here that the pressure on India is actually building as we speak. There has been some tough talking today by the Americans and even by the Foreign Secretary from the United Kingdom to the Indian counterparts today.
And you say India is neutral. Unlike most other countries, though, India has agreed to buy Russian oil. Close relations, good news for both countries economically.
That's right. I mean, it's not just India, unfortunately, that's buying oil from Russia. Clearly, India is only, I think, making use of the discounts that are given to the Indian side by the Russians. In fact, the Western countries are buying gas from Russia as well, but that's besides the point. I think here is a somewhat poor country that's still growing. Our exchange rate is, I think, in doldrums. We are still recovering from COVID, economic onslaught, and the retail prices are actually going up. The petrol prices are going up. So, given that economic condition that we face, I think India would look for cheap energy from anywhere. And actually, it is not too much energy that we are buying from the Russians. It's probably 1 to 2% of our daily need. But I think it's mostly the defense equipment that India is looking at. It's more than energy. It's actually the long-term Indian dependence on the defense equipment that has traditionally come from Russia, which is about 60% at least.
Hapiman Jacob, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme today.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, don't tell the president. Western intelligence claims Putin's generals fear saying how badly the Ukraine war is going.
The British public not only need to know, but they want to know more about China. 70 years ago, a small group of British businessmen travelled to China to unlock opportunities between the two countries. They became known as the icebreakers.
East meets West. We're now at a time when we need the icebreaker spirit.
My first impression when I came to China is I noticed the similarities more than the differences.
It's about understanding each other's culture.
We look at the things that bring our nations together.
My dad is Chinese, my mom is English. I grew up in London, but I went to China to work at age 25.
Whenever I've gone to China, it's just been amazingly welcoming.
The music is beautiful language and bringing all the people together.
I'm exploring, I'm experimenting, I'm trying something new, all in the hopes to build a bridge. And I think we definitely need more people doing that.
It was only when I got to know my Chinese father in my 40s that I really got to know the other half of myself.
I hope we make it another 50 years, another 500 years.
Meet the bridge builders, the individuals who dared to think beyond the horizon and to open up our world, on TV and online on CGTN.
I hope that you will all become icebreakers and bridge builders.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
NATO has said there is no evidence that Russian forces are withdrawing from areas around Kyiv and northern Ukrainian cities, but rather that they're planning a possible new offensive.
Moscow had announced at talks in Istanbul that it would de-escalate operations near the Ukrainian capital. NATO's Jens Stoltenberg said Russia must be judged on its actions alone.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. At the same time, Russia maintains pressure on Kyiv and other cities. So we can expect additional offensive actions, bringing even more suffering.
Well, fresh attempts are underway to evacuate civilians from the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Kyiv has sent buses to try to move people from areas worst hit by Russian shelling. The bombardment of Kyiv and Kharkiv has continued 2 days after Russia said it would scale back its military operations. Russia has said it wants to focus on capturing parts of eastern Ukraine. Well, Kieran McQuillan is an Associated Press correspondent in the city of Lviv. Kieran, first of all, what can you tell us about these evacuation efforts in Mariupol?
Well, Jamie, of course, Mariupol has become synonymous with this war, this invasion, the largest ground invasion of one European country by another since the Second World War, and the plight of all those poor people that are still trapped in that city. Some estimates put that at somewhere between 100 and 150,000. Now, a Russian ceasefire went into effect 9 hours ago. The Russian military says it is committed to a ceasefire along a localized route around Mariupol, to facilitate the transport of some of these people out of the city. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk, she's the lady who's tasked with arranging these logistics and negotiating with the Russians to facilitate the evacuation of these people. She said that she sent 45 buses in this morning to withdraw some of the people that have already come to either Berdansk, to a staging post outside, or from the city itself. And we heard from her office a couple of hours ago that the first column of buses had left Berdansk to their final destination, which is Zaporizhzhia, where they will get a little bit of rest and respite, and may end up here in Lviv, where a lot of these displaced people, internally displaced people, are now living.
Western sanctions are being stepped up. New sanctions on Russia announced by the United Kingdom, including on the man said to be behind the bombing campaign on Mariupol.
That's right, Jamie. His name is Colonel General Mikhail Mizintsev. He's the chief of the National Defense Command and Control Center. Now, this is where Russia will and has been coordinating all of its campaign as it's completed this invasion of Ukraine. Mizintsev is alleged to have ordered the destruction of the maternity hospital down there in Mariupol, as well as the bombing of that theatre where between 1,000 and 1,500 women and children were sheltering, and the shocking images that we saw of people in the lobby in that particular theatre. He's also alleged to have orchestrated Moscow's bombing campaign in Syria, which largely destroyed the city of Aleppo 6 years ago. Liz Truss, the Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom, has also announced that 14 new sanctions on other individuals. She says they are Russia's propagandists and state machinery who are spreading lies and deceit about Vladimir Putin's invasion of this country.
Kharkiv seems to be at the centre of the latest Russian attacks. What's the latest we hear from there?
We're hearing on local Telegram channels. Telegram is one of the ways in which information is disseminated across this country and many other countries. The Kharkiv press agency, local press agency, reporting earlier that 10 very large explosions are heard. Supply route from the city of Kharkiv down to that besieged city of Mariupol. It's an absolutely vital strategic objective of Russian forces to seize that city, because that will free up this logistics route and allow them to resupply along that new eastern front that is opening up along the Donbass region. We're also hearing that Russian troops have left the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the exclusion zone around that area. This is according to the Ukraine's nuclear operator. It's called Energoatom. It reported on Thursday that Russian troops were leaving the power plant and were heading back towards Belarus. Now, all of this comes on a day when Vladimir Putin signed a decree in Moscow committing an extra 135 conscripts to this invasion of this country.
Kieran, thanks for that. Kieran McQuillan from the Associated Press in Lviv.
The boss of British spy agency GCHQ has claimed Vladimir Putin is being lied to by his top commanders. Sir Jeremy Fleming said the Kremlin had overestimated the abilities of its military to secure a rapid victory.
His comments come as the Russians announced a shift in campaign priorities from the capital Kyiv to Donbass in the east of Ukraine. Our correspondent Andrew Wilson reports.
Things are shifting on the ground. Fighting continues around the capital, Kyiv, but there's talk of a change in Russian priorities, a new concentration on the east. That strategy was confirmed by Russia's Ministry of Defense.
The purpose of regrouping Russian armed forces is to focus on key fronts and, first of all, to complete our operation for the total liberation of Donbass.
But in a speech in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming, head of GCHQ, said he thought the Russian campaign was in difficulties, with the Kremlin ill-informed by its forces on the front lines.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
As Ukrainian troops report small victories on the ground, declassified American intelligence is reporting a growing divide between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his top commanders, after Moscow said it was shifting away from Kyiv. 8 generals are reported as being sacked, and US officials say Putin feels he's been misled about the scale of losses on the ground and the use of conscripts to fight the war.
It increasingly looks like Putin has massively misjudged the situation. It's clear he's misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. He underestimated the strength of the coalition his actions would galvanise. He underplayed the economic consequences of the sanctions regime. And he overestimated the abilities of his military to secure a rapid victory.
How much this influences the chances for peace talks recently assembled in Turkey is not clear. And the Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, a Moscow ally, posted a video immediately denying any change in the Russian mission. We will make no concessions, he said. But it's on the battlefield that changes are confirmed, and thus far there's little sign of redeployment or let-up in the fighting. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
The head of French military intelligence has reportedly been sacked for failing to predict the war in Ukraine. It's claimed that General Eric Vidot gave inadequate briefings that concluded an attack by Russia was unlikely. That's despite the United States and other Western powers saying Moscow's invasion was imminent. Our correspondent Ryan Thompson is in Paris for us. Ryan, what has been said in France?
Hi there, Robin. Well, there's two different angles on this story. The official line from France's defense ministry is that Eric Vidot has been let go, a departure from the job after just 7 months because of a reorganization internally. But AFP reporting from the French press agency suggests through multiple defense and intelligence sources here that the departure is because he had failed in terms of delivering a comprehensive report about the state of Russia's invasion in early January and February, at a time when the United States and the United Kingdom was reporting that an attack was imminent. French intelligence was saying it was not to be worried about. And of course, this coincides with diplomatic missions being undertaken by the French president, Emmanuel Macron. He was in Moscow, he was in Kyiv, trying to be a peace builder between the two sides to see if a diplomatic solution could be reached here. But there, of course, is the second question now, looking at the big picture, that while he was in Moscow speaking face-to-face with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, did he have the proper intelligence to know what the exact movements were Russian forces along the border, and what was their thinking at that time?
Well, Ryan, you mentioned those diplomatic missions undertaken by President Macron. Are there wider concerns here about the French response on Ukraine?
Well, the French response has been from the start to see if a diplomatic bridge could be built to at least bring the two sides to a table, the two leaders face to face. There were hopes in late February, that a return to the Normandy format could happen, with Germany, France, Ukraine and Russia all meeting at the table with their heads of states and heads of government to see if they could potentially have another return to what was the Minsk agreements and revision of that, given the recent aggressions. But ultimately, of course, the Russian invasion put that to the side. So now, really looking back at the big pictures, there's question that when Emmanuel Macron was in Moscow speaking face-to-face with Vladimir Putin, did he have the best intelligence? Was his negotiations well informed? And there are fears here that ultimately it was not the case. It's possible that a Senate inquiry could be down the line, according to some sources near the Elysee.
Ryan Thompson in Paris, thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, raising billions for Afghanistan. The United Nations launches its largest ever humanitarian appeal for a single country.
It is now important that all of us in Europe act very swiftly.
Fines for the non-vaccinated will most likely be between $1,000 and $4,000.
The new Omicron variant circulating in southern Africa.
The financial markets have also reacted badly to the news.
Growing dissatisfaction with the way the Dutch government is handling the pandemic.
Cancelling the city's main public Christmas markets for the second year in a row.
Protests and riots by those opposed to restrictions and vaccinations.
There is no room for complacency in this ongoing battle against COVID.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: pay for our gas in Russian rubles, or we'll turn off the taps tomorrow. President Putin's warning to Europe.
The United States says it will release 1 million barrels of oil a day from its strategic reserve to bring down soaring prices.
And fresh efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from the port city of Mariupol as Russia's bombardment of Ukraine continues.
The UK, Germany, Qatar and the United Nations are hosting a virtual international conference to raise funds for humanitarian projects in Afghanistan.
The United Nations is hoping for $4.4 billion to help the country. Our correspondent, Naweed Jabarkal, has the story for us. Naweed.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, it's been almost 8 months since the Afghan government's collapse, the withdrawal of United States and foreign forces from the country and the Taliban's takeover. Since then, the humanitarian situation has grown increasingly desperate on the ground. According to the UN development programs, 97% of Afghans could be living in poverty by the middle of this year. More than 24 million people in the country now need aid to survive. More than half the population is facing acute hunger, with 9 million of those in need of emergency food supplies. Afghanistan's economy and banking system are also on the brink of collapse, which could leave up to 80% of people in debt. In September, more than $1 billion was pledged by the international community to help the United Nations efforts, but Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said it was unclear how much of that would actually materialize. Well, one major challenge preventing aid getting to the country are sanctions on the Taliban. The US, UK and EU have all said assistance should be partly dependent on what the group does, especially when it comes to human rights and towards women and girls. Girls were supposed to be allowed back into secondary school classrooms all across the country earlier this month, but a surprise last-minute U-turn saw many sent home from schools. Kani Wignaraju is the United Nations Assistant Secretary-General and says the road to recovery for Afghanistan is proving longer than expected.
We had hoped by this time that you would see some basic recovery coming through, and we're not yet there. And I think part of that reason has to do that local markets have yet to really be jump-started. So we need to see more cash flowing through the domestic financing system.
Afghanistan, as you know, has become used to these sorts of donor conferences, particularly in the past 2 decades. Often pledges are made, not always kept either. How can you ensure that they are this time?
We're asking for $4.4 billion for the humanitarian response plan. I think this time by also asking for the $3.6 billion on the essential services. I hope that all of the attention and the resources that are being drawn away into other parts of the world, and particularly with the Russia-Ukraine conflict going on, that the world does not forget Afghanistan. The current halt on girls going to school above grade 6, to me, denying education is denying a lifetime of not just opportunity, but of a contribution to a country.
The UK and Germany, of course, co-hosting this conference today. They've been clear that aid comes with conditions, and one of those is the progress on human rights and women's rights. Is that going to be a focus for the UN in terms of distribution and where you're targeting any assistance that comes?
For countries, they've got to also be very cognizant of the pressures, the demands, the expectations of their taxpayers. And I think here for the UN, that's on the ground and working every day. I mean, we've stayed and delivered. We've not left the country. Part of our role is to day by day, to keep putting the key issues, the values we stand for with a UN Charter on the table.
And another major challenge for getting aid into the country has been sanctions on the Taliban. Can those be avoided as far as aid is concerned? Do they have to be avoided?
The sanctions are vis-a-vis the Taliban and specific individuals who are in the de facto authorities. They're not on Afghanistan, and they're not on the Afghans. So it does allow money to move into the country where we can work in all of these areas.
The conference takes place in New York. The Taliban itself, officials are in China meeting with Chinese officials there, seeking more international recognition. As far as the UN is concerned, in the long term, is that necessary?
I think from an international community and from a UN standpoint, the conversation of recognition, of working and engaging increasingly with the authorities, with the necessary changes that they've got to bring about. There are obligations that have to be met, and those are, it's going to be, as I said, this has to be an everyday conversation to move the needle.
That virtual conference is taking place at the moment. The United States has pledged $204 million for the country this year, almost half the amount promised by the United Kingdom. The head of the UN, Antonio Guterres, says countries must make cash available so the Afghan economy can breathe and the Afghan people can eat. Jamie, Robin.
Naweed, thank you very much. Well, the Taliban government in Afghanistan is hoping to boost trade links with neighbouring countries.
Officials have been meeting foreign ministers from 7 countries that border Afghanistan at a 2-day gathering in China. Our correspondent Dong Shui reports.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his counterparts from Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Chinese President Xi Jinping has also sent a written address to the gathering. She says that Afghanistan is at a critical stage of overcoming chaos to achieve the inner stability. He stresses a peaceful, stable and developing Afghanistan is not only for its own people, but also other nations in that region and of course the international community. The UN Secretary General also made his speech via video link. He called on all countries to continue to provide humanitarian support to rebuild the economy and ensure women's rights and education in Afghanistan. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov criticized the U.S. freezing of assets of Afghanistan's central bank, and his position was also echoed by the foreign ministers from Iran and Pakistan. Well, Iran's Hossein Amir-Abdollahian has also tackled other challenges faced by the current Taliban government, such as, the threat of ISIS and its stalled economy. Afghanistan's acting foreign minister called for a lifting of all sanctions on Afghanistan currently. He said that, I quote, that independence would require stability and not to be dependent on the mercy of the United States to grant the rights to Afghanistan. We've learned that a joint statement on the Afghan issue is expected, which is aimed to helping rebuild the economy and getting global recognition.
Dong Shui reporting.
Well, the leader of Georgia's breakaway region of South Ossetia says he's planning a referendum on becoming part of Russia. Moscow recognized South Ossetia as an independent state after a war with Georgia in 2008. Russia supports the area financially and has stationed troops there and offered citizenship to residents. Georgia's foreign minister said any referendum is unacceptable while Russian forces occupy part of the country.
A Turkish prosecutor has called for the trial of 26 Saudis accused of involvement in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi to be moved to Riyadh. The journalist and critic of the Saudi regime is believed to have been murdered in Saudi's Istanbul consulate in 2018. The court says it will consult the Turkish government about a possible transfer. It comes as Turkey seeks to repair its relationship with the Gulf state.
Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, is under a thick layer of smog from construction, exhausts and smoke from coal-fired ovens are thought to be the cause. Kathmandu is one of the 10 most polluted cities in the world, with air quality often unhealthy.
And still ahead, supermarket sweep, a race to shop. Shanghai stocks up before lockdown.
This is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown. As they do so,
there are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas.
So it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated. It's the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
Have you ever wondered how much a human life is worth?
Have you ever looked up at the night sky and considered whether aliens are staring back? Or if it's even possible to measure intelligence?
If that sounds like you, it's time to join the Answers Project with me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge.
We've recruited the best brains in the world, award-winning astrophysicists, giants of medical science, and former presidential advisors to help us tackle humanity's biggest questions.
Find the answers wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. People living in Shanghai are rushing to stock up on groceries before phase 2 of the city's lockdown takes effect.
The first phase was launched on Monday, covering the eastern side of the city. Over 5,500 cases were reported in the city on Wednesday. Our correspondent Wang So-wen reports.
Vegetables, meat, and fruit, those are some of the daily necessities in big demand here in Shanghai. With the city's two-phased closed-off management, the largest in 2 years, millions of residents are undergoing another round of mass PCR testing. Most residents are heading to supermarkets to stock up.
Take this store, for example. Our current orders is about 5 to 6 times higher than the past. The average daily sales of vegetables online and offline is almost 10 times than the past.
Waiting in line to get in and check out. Many get up early to wait their turn. Fresh vegetables are some of the items in highest demand.
We know that there will be a lot of people, so we come earlier and wait in line. Green vegetables and Chinese cabbage are hard to get. Meat supply is enough.
The city's supermarkets and food vendors are working full steam to meet consumer demand.
Different members have taken up extra tasks like packing and stocking supplies to ensure customers' needs ahead of Friday, April 1st, when the west part of Shanghai entered closed-off management.
We replenish the supplies after we close the store. We used to replenish supplies at 5 a.m. in the morning, but recently we stayed up all night to replenish supplies. We have found multiple channels to increase our import from other provinces like Zhejiang, Jiangsu, and wholesale markets.
While city officials noted Wednesday night, these combined efforts will guarantee stable supplies of food and household goods when shoppers go to stores or order online. Wang So-wen, CGTN, Shanghai.
The demand for luxury real estate in the United States is showing no sign of slowing. And in Los Angeles, the high-end market is hitting record levels. Our correspondent Adiz Tianshan has been to Beverly Hills, where multi-million-dollar homes are hot property.
Massive backyards with swimming pools, spacious rooms with breathtaking views. The luxury housing market is booming across the United States.
The market is truly unbelievable all over the United States, but particularly here in Los Angeles. And right now, we are #1 in the United States for luxury sales over $10 million. Los Angeles has 27% of that market.
Given its warm climate and worldwide destinations like Malibu, Beverly Hills, and Hollywood, experts say Los Angeles has increasingly become a global destination for world buyers.
Last year, which is 2021, Los Angeles traded 628 properties worth of $10 million and above. Additionally, that was a 90.3% increase year over year from 2020.
Last year alone, Los Angeles saw a $10.6 billion trade volume in the sale of luxury homes worth $10 million and above. Housing market in LA overall has become incredibly competitive, but when it comes to luxury homes, it's gone through the roof. And the days of traditional bidding wars are over. It's become a commonplace for buyers now to pay $500,000 or more above the asking price to secure the purchase.
We've had strong offers on our house, and we've had a bidding war, and it came in over our asking price, which was surprising to us. And I think that happened because people are looking for properties that are unique.
Some realtors say the coronavirus pandemic has changed many people's priorities and led to an increase in demand for luxury living. But new economic realities are also a factor. The current inflation and the interest rates could continue to keep the housing market strong at least throughout 2022, with California market expected to remain competitive for much longer. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Beverly Hills.
The headlines again: pay for our gas in Russian rubles or we'll turn off the taps tomorrow. President Putin's warning to Europe.
The United States says it will release 1 million barrels of oil a day from its strategic reserve to bring down soaring prices.
And fresh efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from the port city of Mariupol as Russia's bombardment of Ukraine continues.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.